there, friends and sane persons, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. My name is Kyle. It's Wednesday, and Wednesday Whimsy is a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game, a top 10, some sort of other game-related topic usually, sometimes not, whatever happens to be on my mind that week. This week, as in the past couple of weeks, we are going through more of my top 100 games. So, as a reminder, the last three episodes have seen me talk about my top 100 through 41 games. So, numbers 100 through 41. This time, I'm going to talk about the next 20, and then hopefully this Saturday or Sunday, sometime this weekend, I believe, we're going to go through the last final top 100 or top 20. So we'll have the definitive answer as of right now, what my top 100 games are. Anyway, we're just going to talk about each one briefly with 20 games to talk about. It will take a bit of time, so I'm going to go through these lightning fast, or at least somewhat fast, to try and get through them as quickly as possible. But these are very exciting games, and I'll, of course, want to talk about them. But with that out of the way, let's go to my number 40. My number 40 is a game that has actually seen a lot of success. This is part of a series. We already talked about one entry in the series, which was Ankh, Gods of Egypt. This game is Blood Rage. So Blood Rage is an interesting combination of drafting and sort of energy management, sort of timing. It has a lot in common with Cthulhu Wars and with Chaos in the Old World. Chaos in the Old World is, of course, a game by the same designer, so it definitely makes sense for him to borrow from himself. This one has a sort of a Viking Norse mythology type theme. You have a clan. The clans start out all the same, but you're going to, through a combination of drafting cards and sort of your successes, you're going to differentiate your clan. You're going to focus on different ways to score. You're going to summon big monsters that will give you special abilities. You're trying to win combats or lose combats as you desire. You're trying to be in certain areas that you know are going to be destroyed so that you get a whole bunch of points, and then you can kind of resummon your familiars later on. The combat is card combat, so you add up your value of all your figures, and then everyone will play a card, and that card could give you a boost, and then whoever has the most is going to win. It's an interesting game. It works well with, it kind of needs 3 players at least. It's not the greatest at 2, I would say, but it looks great. It is great. It's one that I enjoy. My number 40, Blood Rage. Let's move on now to my number 39. My number 39 was a surprise to me. Last year, or I guess this year on the cruise, this past year, I played it and I was just really taken by it. That game is First Rat. So First Rat is an interesting little game where you are a team of rats and you are trying to be the first rat on the moon. What that means in practice is on your turn, you're going to move one or more of your rats along this little path, and you're going to activate the spaces that you land on. You can either race to the top and try and get all 4 of your rats to that top area to kind of end the game early when you're in the lead, or you can focus on these various different areas where you can turn in goods or cheese or race around this track and sort of use the other aspects of the game to try and score points in more of a long game type strategy. Either way works. They're both very fun. The rules are super simple to teach. It's really quite a surprise success for a lot of reasons. My number 39, First Rat. After First Rat, we have a game that is not light or easy to teach, really. This is a game that's almost more reading a book than playing a game. That game is Sleeping Gods. So Sleeping Gods is a game where what you're doing is you're sailing around and having an adventure. It's basically a large choose-your-own-adventure style game. You have a ship that you're sailing through this storybook, and as you go to different spots, you will read different adventures. You will, it might say if you have this item, you can proceed to here. If you don't have this item, don't do anything, but come back later. There's an interesting card combat system. It's kind of hard to describe even where you are putting these discs out or these hits out on the enemies, and then you can kind of branch out from the spots where you've hit them. It's really interesting. The combat is definitely lots of the gameplay, and I would say, although I find it interesting, it's the least interesting part of the game. The story is a whole lot better, and I will say, after I'd played it a few times, I was tempted just to say, well, I win the combat or I lose the combat, something like that, just because the story that you're telling and the adventure you're experiencing, it kind of almost gets set aside. Okay, I've got to deal with the combat. But again, I enjoy it. I think it's very fascinating. I wish it were a smaller, easier, more streamlined part of the game. But you can have a great adventure in a really long time. This game is not for the faint of heart. It will take you several hours. I mean, start it on a Saturday morning and play all day. But if you do it, you'll be happy. There's a whole lot to discover here. Really enjoy 38 Sleeping Gods. Next up is a game that was new at the Dice Tower Cruise this year. I played it hoping that I would not like it. Unfortunately, I failed. This game is, I've often described it, in fact, every time I talk about it, I describe it as a space tapestry. So what you're doing is you have this rather large board here, and it has several tracks on it. They're just basically differently disguised tracks. There's a blue track where it's actually a track, and an orange track where it's actually a track. And then there's this sort of trade stall thing where the track is kind of hidden. But ultimately, you're trying to be as far along on certain tracks as possible. You are using worker placement. Your workers have two sides. You can put them out as their funding side, I guess, which is going to increase these projects at the end of the game if a project scores. So, for example, this one I'm showing here is for the yellow. If this makes it all the way to the end, then whoever is farthest along on the yellow track, or has the most influence in yellow, as the game calls it, is going to get a big pile of points. And so you're trying to sort of think about, am I going to advance this one? Is someone else going to help me advance it? And you don't want to advance something that someone else is going to get a lot of points for. So there's a lot there. And there's also voting. Each round, there's two sides, and one of them is going to score points based upon, how you do on one of the tracks, basically. And you're going to sort of put your thing with the voting side, whichever one has the most votes is going to score that. So you're kind of thinking about that too. And then there's sort of a small area control thing in these rows. Whoever has the most votes in a row is going to get extra points. Rules are actually pretty simple. You just place your worker, and then you do what the action is, and you might have a bonus action. You can kind of unlock bonuses as the game goes on. I played this once. I was just so into it. I immediately set it up and played it again. This is one that I really enjoyed, even though I was not expecting to. I was kind of hoping it would be bad, and I could avoid purchasing it. But alas, I did enjoy it, and I now have a copy too, actually, for reasons that are not relevant to this. Anyway, that is my number 37, Federation, a fantastic game. My number 36 is another fantastic game. This one is, very different from Federation. This game is called Abyss. So Abyss is kind of well known for its relatively fantastic artwork. In fact, not just relatively. It has fantastic artwork. But it's a small game in a big box. You have this large presentation here, but really what it is a fairly simple card game. The main mechanism of the game is going to be this bidding track, which I can't seem to find. Well, anyway, I guess we'll go back to that first one. So you're going to flip over a card on your turn, and then everyone else has a chance to buy that card. Now, once someone's bought a card, they can't buy another one, and you get the money, the pearl that they spend. And so then you can keep going. If you eventually make it to the end, you get the card, and no one can really take it from you. So there's kind of waiting, sort of the push your luck for other people on your turn as they're deciding, okay, do I want to wait? Do I want to let you have this? And then you're using these cards in various combinations to activate different abilities. For example, you're going to buy these Lord cards, which are largely the end game trigger, but they're going to give you bonuses, they're going to give you points, they're going to give you access to keys, which let you in turn buy these bigger scoring tokens. There's a lot of scoring here. There's not really a ton of theme other than the artwork, but the gameplay is really very satisfying. It has 2 expansions, one of which I've played, and unfortunately, at least in the early editions, you really can't separate out again. And then the other one that I've heard is amazing, but have not tried yet. So that is Abyss. Even just the base game, though, is fantastic. Lots of fun. Pretty simple, but there's a lot there to explore. My number 35 is a game with even less theme than Abyss. If you watched our list of board game mummies, which of course was games with that are so dry, you will see that this was, I believe, my number 1. This game, set 1,000 years after the California Gold Rush by my favorite designer, Vladimir Sushi, is Pulsar 2849. So in Pulsar 2849, you're doing space stuff, basically. Well, that family looks like that kid is really excited about Pulsar. What you're really doing is you're trying to kind of build up your own scoring mechanisms. The way you're going to get a lot of points by activating these pulsars. You'll sort of lasso them, and then you can build these stations in there that get you points every round. There's tech trees to go up. There's abilities that you can unlock. You can sort of zoom around the galaxy and just discover stuff. There's a lot of ways to score. You'll do a lot of scoring. The board is kind of dark. The rules are a little much. What they might take a time to get through, but the gameplay just really fantastic. I'm not sure how well the game did, because it hasn't gotten any. I mean, look, it's got lots of awards. Maybe you can see some on the box, but it's not gotten an expansion. So I think it's probably done. But I really enjoy it. It's one that I'm always eager when somebody is willing to take that journey with me. Pulsar, definitely worth it. Let's go on. Oh, I didn't put it up. I always do that, don't I? There we go. Pulsar 2849, my number 35. Let's go on to my number 34. My number 34 was the first game I ever did a Wednesday Whimsy about. And you may not remember that, or you may. This is a pirate-themed game, and it is just a fantastic one. This game is Dead Reckoning. So in Dead Reckoning, you are a crew of pirates. You are sailing around, and this is the best implementation of the so-called card crafting system. What you're doing is you have, I believe, 12 cards. Can't remember the name, but you're going to have the same cards for the entire game. There's no way to get rid of them. But as you go through the game, you're going to be sleeving these special abilities in, and then every time you play that card in the future, it's going to be better. It's going to be different. It's going to give you something. It looks like there's lots of upgrades here. There's an interesting combat system where you toss cubes into this ship, and they're going to bounce out and land in these different areas, and they're going to do damage, or you can do damage and destroy your opponent. But really what you want are these crowns, because the crowns are what's going to let you win the combat. When you win the combat, of course, it's great. You get usually some sort of a bonus by doing so. You can fight others. You can fight sort of neutral opponents as well. There's a solo mode, which I found interesting. There is a campaign mode, which I found completely underwhelming. It was just basically playing the game 12 times and saying who won, or however many times it was. But just playing the game is really interesting. There's also these saga expansions, which you should just always use. They just give you sort of some story that might come up throughout the game. I just really love this one. I find it fascinating. I find the theme comes across well. And it was such a breath of fresh air, one that I really, really love and really love to play again. Dead Reckoning. So let's move on now to another game that I love and would really love to play again. But this one is probably the hardest one on my list to get to the table because of just what it is. So this game it's from Chip Theory Games, which is one of my favorite publishers, and also some of my favorite designers are involved. The game is called Cloudspire. So Cloudspire it's kind of designed like a tower defense game, basically. you'll have these towers, which these ones are nicely painted. Mine are not. I should see if I can get someone on that. But what you have is this board, which, okay, it's kind of busy, but you're going to build these towers out there, and then when your opponent's enemies approach them, they're going to get shot at. That's kind of the core. You want to, of course, you can destroy opponents' towers, but what you're really trying to do is to prevent your enemy from marching up and knocking on your front door, because when they destroy your base, of course, you lose the game. The game can also be played over, you can sort of see how many rounds it takes, or you can, basically there's a way to lose points after a certain number of rounds, usually 4, I believe, or you can play until someone's base is destroyed. You're upgrading your base, you're upgrading your units, you're buying new units, you're sending them out, and most of your sort of wimpy units are going to move in a pre-programmed way, whereas you have a couple of heroes that'll go out there and you have more autonomy over them. You can move them around and sort of do their own thing. There's adventures to have. All of the different factions, I believe there are 6 now with the expansion. They're all very different. They do a lot of different things. There's also a ridiculously complicated hummingbird unit, which I love that faction, but I hate explaining the rules for that one. Anyway, there's really a lot to love here, but there's a whole bunch of keywords. You're using these chips, and the chips will have all kinds of stuff written on them. So because the keywords, it can be difficult to kind of teach. You get every person is playing differently. You'll have units with different abilities. So it's not very new player friendly. But if you can get someone involved, ooh, is this ever satisfying. Also, there's a co-op version and a very decent solo kind of campaign that you can play, which will really help you learn the different factions and their abilities. And I found that to be really quite engaging. Anyway, Cloudspire is an absolute hit for me. It looks like I've forgotten to put its name up. But it is a great game, hard to get to the table, hard to teach, hard to learn, and very expensive, but worth the effort. Next up, we have another game that is expensive and not very new player friendly, but for a completely different reason. This is a game that I wanted to hate. In fact, I actively avoided it for a long time. This is Shadows of Brimstone. Now, there's a bunch of different versions here. I actively avoided it because you have to put all the figures together. They come on sprues. You got to cut them off and assemble them. And, that just was enough of a barrier of entry to me that I wasn't interested. But at Gen Con, at COVID Gen Con, all the big publishers pulled out, and so these smaller publishers like Flying Frog had the big publishers' spots essentially, and so they had a lot of demo tables. And my brother and I sat down and we just played this several times. We sat through several demos and both bought the whole thing. It is just a fascinating dungeon crawl. You are usually an Old West cowboy, although there's a bunch of different factions and scenarios now, and you go into this mine and you're going to go through the mine. You're looking for a scenario. You might find a gate. Behind the gate is another world. And so that's kind of how all these expansions kind of link together. You have the base mine, but you might end up in a volcano, or you might end up in Norse mythology. You might end up in the belly of a giant monster in feudal Japan. There's a bunch of different places you can end up. And it just sort of has so much variety. There are hundreds of different monsters now. I don't even have them all. I do have several, and my friend Victor has painted most of them for me. So they look a lot better than they normally would. But this is just such an immersive and enjoyable experience. It is very much a dice, throw the dice and see what happens. Wildly swingy, very lucky, and very much a, in your sort of fight the monsters, roll buckets of dice type game. But the stories you will have, the adventures you will experience, really there's very little that compares to it. So, it's very expensive. It's very difficult to sort of get everything put together and ready to go. But I also really found it worth the effort. So that seems to be my theme here, is games that are worth the effort. Let's go on now to my number 31. Number 31 is a game Ilya really likes, and I really like it too, just less than he does. But I remember when this came out, I was playing it constantly. This is a stock market game called Stockpile. So in Stockpile, it's the game of insider trading and hidden information. You have a character that gives you a special power, but mostly what you have is a piece of information about one of the 6 stocks in the game. You know whether it's going to go up in value, whether it's going to pay dividends, or whether it's going to decrease in value, and really how much. So you have that information, but then you have to play. You have to play 2 cards, one face up, one face down into these stacks, and so you can kind of use that to hide what you want to hide and show what you want to show. And then ultimately it comes down to bidding. It's an interesting bidding mechanism where you start at 0 normally, and then other people can go in front of you, but they have to go on a higher number. And you always have to go to a higher number. So it's these fixed intervals, and you're kind of thinking, okay, it's a little push your lucky as you decide, am I going to go for this? Am I going to sort of bluff someone else? Maybe I can get him to sort of pay more for something. And I know there's a bunch of crap in that pile. There's just a lot going on in a fairly simple set of rules, and it can be a fascinatingly enjoyable experience. There's a couple of expansions. Some are great, some are just okay, but I really enjoy the game, even just in its core form. My number 31, Stockpile. All right, next we're going to move up to a couple games that have fallen on my list, and they've actually fallen quite a bit. And this could be partially due to the Pub Meeple system that I used, but it could also be that I haven't really played them in a while. And that's not because they're bad. It's just the thought of getting either of them out has been daunting. And so the first one we have is Aeon's End, which is coming in at my number 30. Aeon's End is one of the best deck builders out there. It is a cooperative battle game where you are going to be some sort of a wizard-like character, and you are playing against a big bad, and you are trying to use your deck building skills to defeat the big bad or to run it through its deck. There's a bunch of different characters. There's a bunch of different cards for abilities. There's a bunch of different big bads, and you're trying to open these breaches, which are spaces where you can essentially play your spells. And by opening them, you're going to use your resources to open them, and that'll allow you to cast more and more, and eventually try and overwhelm the big bad. It's there's a bunch of different villains, like I said, a lot of scenarios. There's a great campaign system. There are 2 legacy sets, one of which is pretty good and one of which I really actually didn't like, and that actually soured me on the game a little bit. The second one I found to be beyond underwhelming, although the final boss was kind of epic. But I know that the game has fallen for me because I got an expansion for it, and I still haven't even opened it. And that's because there are so many cards. I mean, this thing is in 4 huge boxes over on my shelf, and the thought of opening them gives me anxiety attacks. There's just so much here that the game, and there's no real way to store it. Yeah, it looks like you can store it like this. Good luck. That's good for one set, but there's so many sets. So the game has kind of expanded beyond the limits of what I'm comfortable with, maybe. And it just takes so long to set up and tear down, which is why it's fallen a lot. But I still really like it. I wish the app had all of the characters, all the stuff in it, because I'd play the heck out of that thing. Because then it takes care of all the stuff for me. But regardless, Aeon's End is still a great game, even if it's fallen a bit on my list. The next game kind of hurts me, but it's kind of for the same reason. The game is just so hard to get to. This has been as high as my number 2, and that game is Sentinels of the Multiverse. I still rate it a 10 out of 10, but this isn't a list of my sort of top 10 tens. This is how I feel about the games in relation to each other. And Sentinels of the Multiverse has fallen for me just a little bit. In Sentinels of the Multiverse, you have these cool superheroes, and they have a bunch of different effects, and you're kind of like Aeon's End, you're going up against a big bad. And the one problem with the game is not the variety, it is the fact that there is so much to keep track of. This looks like somebody's homemade versions, and that's amazing. I love that people do that. Um, I won't find very good pictures, but you're kind of going up against the bad guys. You're using your special abilities. You're drawing cards. You're playing cards. It can be kind of random, but it's one of those games that the more you play it, the better you get. So it can't be totally random. All of the bad guys are unique and they're fun. There's a big sort of Oblivion event, which is a several-hour gaming scenario as you sort of go through character after character. I mean, these are the superheroes I'd love to see in a movie. Forget the Marvel ones. This is what I want. I love Sentinels of the Multiverse. I love the new version. They're kind of redoing it with better art. And I have 2 of those sets, and I like playing them. I really enjoy the game. But it's just the thought of having to process all that information can be a bit daunting. It doesn't really play very well solo. You have to play 3 characters. It doesn't really play 2. You got to play 3 characters, so somebody's got to double up. And so because of that, it's a little harder for me to get to the table these days, but still one that I really, really enjoy. Next up, we have a game that I also really, really enjoy, which makes sense because it's on my top 100 list. We help if I could spell it. This game is Maracaibo. So Maracaibo is another game by one of my favorite game designers, Alexander Pfister. And in this game, you are sailing around the Caribbean. And you're going to be stopping at, you're going to go a certain number of spaces, and then you have actions based upon the spaces you visited, or sort of general actions if you went, based on how far you traveled. You're going to go around the sea a few times. When someone makes it to the end, everybody kind of pauses, does a reset, and then gets teleported back to start. But really what you're doing here is kind of building up your economy. And the economy in the game is really your ship and all these cards you play. You can play cards that give you special abilities, cards that let you stop at certain spaces and perform actions differently. You can, get discounts and bonuses and all kinds of things. You have this ship board with these very annoying tokens that are constantly going to fall over. But as you upgrade the ship, you're going to get access to sort of newer abilities. It's very much, the theme is kind of, loosely draped over the top here, but it's a great game and one that I really love playing. Now, it has an expansion. I haven't been overly impressed by the expansion. I think I've only played it the one time. I don't know that it added very much. It also has a campaign, which is a terrible story, poorly written, not exciting at all. But it keeps adding small modules. So put a storm token out on this spot, or put this special area that you can go to, or special action spots. And I love that. It gives you just a little bit of variety for each game. So story is boring, but the actual sort of effects of the story are really interesting. I love Maracaibo. I'm always looking to play it. It's one of the best Alexander Pfister games, not the best, but one of the best. And it's my number 28. So I've been trying as I go through these not to combine games onto a spot, but this one I kind of have to combine, and that is because it is 3 games that are essentially the same. And I'm going to show just one of them here, if I can find it. I'm picking the one with a more generic name, I guess. This game is going to be Imperial Settlers or 51st State. And by Imperial Settlers, I mean either the base one or Empires of the North. These 3 games they're all sort of based on the same original game, which was called 51st State. But what you're doing in these games is sort of building a tableau of cards and activating them to get points. It's really your flavor of your preferred choice of theme and mechanisms here. In 51st State, everyone draws from only a common deck, and it's a race to sort of trigger the end game by getting to, I think, 25 points. In Empires of the North, it's still a race to get to 25 points, but instead of drawing from a common deck, everyone has just a private deck. And then Imperial Settlers kind of melds the two. But you're no longer racing to points. Instead, you're playing through, I believe, 4 rounds. Whoever's the most points after 4 rounds wins. And you have both a common deck and a private deck. And, all the different private factions are very different. Obviously, in 51st State, the factions aren't that different at all. There's usually just a small variance. But all 3, look, if you knew the rules to one, I could teach you the rules to the other in a matter of minutes. It's a very fascinating system, whichever version you happen to enjoy. But Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, and 51st State, all great games and all tied for my number 27. Next up, we have my number 26. Number 26 is one of my preferred travel games and one of the best two-player games ever to come out. And this is Seven Wonders Duel. So I have to admit I'm not the biggest fan of Seven Wonders anymore. I've played too many games that have lasted too long. But Seven Wonders Duel is a spin on that just is pure magic. You have this pyramid of cards you're drafting. You're always going to choose one of the face-up ones. And there's a lot of tension deciding which one to take, because if you uncover something, it'll be available to someone else. There are 3 ways to trigger the end game, at least in the base game. You can survive for 3 full rounds and see who has the most points. You can, there's this tug of war track, this military track, where if you push it all the way to the other person's side, you win instantly. And then there's also these green cards have a symbol on them. And if you get, I believe, 6 different symbols of a total of 7, you instantly win. So there's a lot of sort of push and pull here as to which way you're going to go for. There are also 2 expansions. One of them adds this is sort of a ancient gods theme, and the other one adds a Senate. Both are good. They can both be played together, although I haven't played them both together. The issue with them is that they try to be language independent, so there's a whole bunch of weird symbols on them, and that can make it difficult, especially if the information's hidden. You gotta kind of pass this Rosetta Stone around to try and understand what everything does. Regardless, though, any combination of the game and its expansions is really fascinating. It's fast, it's very intense the whole way through, and it's one I just really want to keep coming back to again and again. Seven Wonders Duel. Next up, we have another 2-player game, another one of the best 2-player games of all time. A game that's I'm never typo, other people can see you. This game is called Blitzkrieg, ! World War II in 20 minutes. And that generic name, Blitzkrieg, it means that you kind of have to really make sure you know which one you're talking about. The game is ugly as sin, but it's fascinatingly fun. You are either the Axis powers or the Allies, and you have this set of tokens, and each turn you have to place a token out. If you can't, you lose. And when you place these tokens, you're going to move this. For example, if I placed this airplane here, it has a value of 2. I put it here. I get the action of the space I cover, and then I'm going to move this thing 2 spaces towards my side. Ultimately, I want it to be on my side when all of the rows are full, or when each row gets full, because whoever has control of it is going to get all the points. You can also, there's a bonus if you can push it all the way to the end. You can kind of close out the area early and get a whole bunch of bonus actions. You're trying to race to a certain score threshold or create a situation where your opponent can't play. Both are viable victory conditions. Both are fun. The game is about 20 minutes. It's a great travel game. It's a great 2-player game. There's another expansion that's, I think, on the other side of the board, where it's alternate history Japan, or Japan and America. The Japanese are in control of the U.S. and the Germans are invading, or something like that. And it's kind of the same game, but with some slight twists. Either way, really fascinating game, just one that's very satisfying every time I play it. That is my number 25, Blitzkrieg. All right, just 1, 2, 3, 4 more today, and then we'll be done with this part of the top 10. Next up, we have a great game in a box that's much too small, Clans of Caledonia. So, wow, it's been 6 years since this came out. I'm excited for its expansion to come soon. Clans of Caledonia, let me put the name up here, is a game about whiskey making, basically. But essentially, you are in Scotland, and you have this board, which is sort of your goods. So at the end of every round, you're going to produce whatever you see. So you'll produce the wool, the yarn, you'll produce the milk, and then if you have milk, you can convert it to cheese if you've uncovered these. You'll produce the grain, and you can convert it into bread and whiskey. You'll also get money. So you're trying to sort of build up this economy by putting your stuff out on the board. And then having stuff in different places is going to allow you to sort of expand more efficiently. There's also a market. You're trying to complete these contracts. There's a lot going on, but the rules are pretty simple, and it's a fantastic game. The special powers are all kind of fun. You're going to start with one special power, and they're all really different. It's not like just get an extra, yarn is you get 3 yarn instead of 4 or something. It's, one of them can hold 2 contracts, and that's great because getting contracts early gets you a bonus. Another one might, not have any of these workers. Instead, they all go on the water. They're these fishermen, and they're they're not worth as much, but they're a lot more flexible and can move around. There's just a bunch of different things to do, and I'm looking forward to more. I just hope it comes with a box that's actually well thought out, because the box in this game is tiny and it's very difficult to organize. Anyway, Clans of Caledonia, despite my small complaint, is a fascinating game. It is my number 24. All right, 3 to go. The next one, I believe I did a Wednesday Whimsy on a little while ago. And it was also on my list of games that were mummies, because there was just so dry in terms of theme. The theme here is meaningless. The game, however, is what it's all about. This game is Darwin's Journey. I don't know if now I might swap this with Nucleum, because Nucleum, I've already talked about last time, I really like. But what you are here is some sort of Darwin enthusiast, and it's a worker placement game. But the hook here is that when you have these workers that are going to specialize, you're going to put these seals on them, and a worker can go to different spaces and do stronger and stronger actions based upon the number of seals he has on him. It's difficult to explain, but it works in practice. There are all these tracks to go up. This is the basic side of the board, but there's an advanced side with even more. And you're going to try and sort of do different things to get points. For example, this round you want to have your magnifiers out, or this round you want to have, I believe that is, you want to have emptied your stacks of stamps. And so you're trying to sort of get these ways to get points, and you're also exploring these islands, which is basically a track, and getting specimens, selling them to the museum. Lots of different sort of mechanisms here, but they all really come together very nicely. Also from one of my favorite designers, Simone Luciani. Those 3 are really hitting it on my list. My top 3 designers, which I guess makes sense. Anyway, Darwin's Journey is a fascinating game, not particularly thematic, but really very satisfying. If you are willing to go through with it, it is a lot. Next up, we started the list with Blood Rage, and I mentioned it was part of a trilogy. This is the 3rd member of the trilogy, and that game is Rising Sun. So Rising Sun is a game in old-timey Japan, and what you're doing is you kind of almost like Blood Rage. You're building up your clan, and your clan has a special ability, and then you're going to sort of spread out and improve yourself by buying different cards and abilities. You're placing workers on the map. There's going to be combat, and the combat is a fascinating little bidding system, almost like Cry Havoc, where you have a secret bid, and there's different actions, and the actions are going to kind of determine the results of the combat. And one of them is essentially winning the combat, trying to win the combat, and the others are going to get you points for a variety of different things. Ultimately, it's I'm not getting good pictures of it here, but those, I bet those don't smell good. But anyway, it's sort of got some area control. There is some negotiation if you want to allow it. I find that bogs the game down and doesn't add much. You can form an alliance, though, which allows you to kind of share your sort of bonuses with other players. And if you're not in the alliance, that kind of sucks. But then it also means you're able to do some things a little bit more efficiently than if you were in an alliance. Anyway, it's a good game. I do think it's better at smaller player counts, just in terms of keeping it moving. But when you can get this one to the table, it's a lot. There's a lot of rules. It's a lot to process, but it's really worth the effort. Best of the 3, I think, and one I really enjoy. Oops, I forgot it again. Yeah, where did my tag go here? Oh, I scrolled down too far. My number 22, Rising Sun. And lastly, I'll put it up first so that I don't forget, one of the best games to come out last year is Endless Winter. Endless Winter is a deck building worker placement game. We've talked about, I believe, Arnak before. We might talk about another one later. Regardless, what you're doing here is you've got, there's a lot going on in this game, to be honest. But you've got this board and you're trying to, they're playing with expansion there. You're trying to spread out and control certain areas to get bonuses at the end of the round. You've got this deck of cards, and the more cards you have, the stronger actions you can do. Unlike the other sort of worker placement deck builders, in this one you can put your worker wherever you want, but if you put it in certain spaces, you'll have stronger actions there based on the cards you have in your hand. There's not that many cards in the game. There's really just kind of 5 core cards, and then these artifacts that you can kind of pick up, which will make your deck a little bit different, a little unique. But anyway, you're playing through 4 rounds. You're vying for turn order. You're trying to get these bonuses. You're putting these tokens out on this board here. Really, it's a whole bunch of mechanisms thrown together, but they come together in a very fascinating way. I was hoping this would not be great because everyone said it would be, and I was being contrarian. I was wrong. This is fantastic. This is a game I'm always really looking forward to. There's a great solo mode, a fantastic, well-designed solo mode that is just too easy. Even if you play it on hard, I find it way too easy. So that's a little unfortunate. But it's a great way to kind of experience the world of the game, even if you just kind of understand you're going to win. Anyway, a lot going on in Endless Winter, but just like every other game in today's discussion, very much worth the effort. And that's it. That was 40 minutes. That's a long episode. I apologize, but we did talk about 20 games, so it's just 2 minutes per game. Think of it like that. That'll take us to the end of my top 100 on Wednesday Whimsy. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to do the final episode, numbers 20 through 1, the top of the top 100 on a Saturday or a weekend show with Ilya. I don't know if it'll be Saturday or Sunday, but watch out, be on the lookout for that. And we'll talk about my favorite games. Some, look, they're all, I'm just really excited about them. I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking and reordering and wondering about this list, and I'm kind of excited to come to the end of it. It's been a fun project, talking about some great games that I enjoy. The ones on today's list are, for the most part, a little bit more thinky, a little headier, but that's okay. You might really enjoy that type of game too. Regardless, we're going to kind of call it here. It's been a long one, and so I'm going to wish you safe travels and courage when you need it, and I will see you back next week on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.